This video was made in association with KnifeInformer.com. Head on over to Knife Informer for all of your blade-related needs, including reviews, comparisons, stats, and more. What is up, everybody, and welcome. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at this Clyde Challenor Talon. This knife is on loan to us from my friend John. He was also nice enough to send along this Brian Nadeau Mini Typhoon and Grimsmo Rask, so that is super amazing of him. Big thanks to John. Let's go ahead and jump into the features and flaws on this knife, but before we do so, a quick size comparison. Ba-bam! So as you guys can see here, one, my PM2 is rusting over a little bit. Definitely need to take care of that. But two, the Talon actually has a lot more in common size-wise with the Rat 2 versus the PM2. Now, I know that some of you might be like myself in thinking that the Talon was a little bit bigger, but you can see that it's not. It really, it's got, really not too much length on the Rat 2, a little bit thicker, a little bit taller, but nothing crazy. So let's go ahead and weigh the Talon and see what we're working with. All right, so let's go ahead and see. I think this is about 4 ounces. Yeah, we're looking at 4.02 ounces, which puts this literally smack dab in the middle of that kind of sweet spot we've talked about on the channel before of like 3.5 to 4.5 ounces. Now, that's by no means, a hard-line statement or anything that anybody has to adhere to. I certainly do not. But that is kind of a good range if you're looking for a general EDC knife. So jumping in to some of the stuff that I want to talk about on this knife, the first of which is going to be the action. Now, I have to say, ultimately, I'm kind of disappointed in this knife's action for a couple of reasons. So the first is that if you can see the flipper tab here, we are looking at smooth surface here, smooth surface on top, little bit of jimping on the tip here, but that's not going to do too much to serve us. So you can see the knife doesn't really want to function as a push button. I'm pushing pretty hard direct pressure onto the tab, and I'm not really getting the detent to break, which means that we are going to be relegated to using, well, certainly not relegated, it's not a bad thing, but we are going to be forced to sort of use the light switch method, which not a terrible thing. I do like having the option with my flipper tabs to kind of do what I want. But we are going to be light switching this knife. However, you can see that doing so gets you deployment that's fine, right? Yeah, the action's fine, but it ends there. It's not snappy. It's not like that sort of, South African thwack that you're used to on something like a Thorburn. You can kind of just hear the difference. Well, see, the knife didn't even deploy that time, but you can hear the difference. We'll do a side by side. So here's a Talon, and here's a Thorburn. I mean, you hear the difference, and now some of that obviously has to do with other factors, like what the tang of the blade is hitting on the inside and everything, and the acoustics of the knife. However, it's pretty clear that this isn't opening with quite as much authority as something like a Thorburn. So that's kind of disappointing. Now, one thing that I do need to point out on the good side, and guys, I can only do this once. The nerve damage that I have in my hand makes this very uncomfortable to do, but I do want to prove to you that you can deploy. God, that feels so weird. You can deploy the knife with that sort of Gavco finger flick. So if that is what you're looking to be doing with this knife, and that will be your primary method of opening it, that's definitely a selling point. The hole does work. The geometry is pretty good. I don't have to get tuck my finger anywhere specific. It pretty freely lets me do that motion. It just feels super weird with my hand. So if you're gonna do that over using the flipper tab, then fine. That's great. And then as you guys can see, in terms of dropping shut, it really doesn't. You can shake it in the sense that it's smooth enough to be sort of manhandled into the closed position, but that's about it. The knife's not running on IKBS like most of these South African flippers that we're used to, and it doesn't have a lot in common with really any South African customs that I'm used to, at least in the traditional sense, right? Your Thorburns, your A2s, your Keith Krugers, etc., etc. You guys know Francois Masson, all the good stuff. So that's a little bit disappointing. Not that IKBS would necessarily make it better on its own, but I know that the gentleman from African Custom Knives had said that they were trying to tell him to use IKBS. So we'll see how his actions improve in the future, but this is not particularly my favorite. Now, that kind of brings us to the next point, which is this this lock bar that I'm just having a lot of trouble with. So the thing that I dislike about this knife overall is similar to what I disliked on the Enrique Pena jigged Zulu flippers. Now, if you guys can think back to that video, I didn't really dive too deep because that, excuse me, that particular flipper that I had, I didn't feel like was up to Enrique's sort of quality. It had been used and stuff. I think it had kind of come loose a little bit, one too many times or something like that. But the thing that I really disliked about it was just how stiff and rigid everything felt and how thick everything was. Just really, it seemed overbuilt in a sort of really negative way, not in a fun way. Like a bodega might be overbuilt or something. So this lock bar here is super thick. You can see overall that the frame is pretty thick. And, you can see here in the relief cut that he cut it super, super thin here. And, he's got this 45-degree chamfer that starts here, and the relief cut goes even beyond the point of chamfer to where it really interrupts the overall flow of the knife. And the reason that he's done that is because it's requiring that much relief to even get the lock bar to function at the level it's functioning at now, because it's just such a thick chunk of titanium. And I have to say that he didn't even go far enough, because this lock bar, one, it's definitely a part of what's wrong with the action. It's that super, super tough lock bar pressure that's just bearing down onto the detent track, as well as the fact that it makes it very difficult to disengage. You can see he has cut out this little relief here to try to make it a little bit easier for you to get in there, but it doesn't really work that well. I'm still kind of ripping up the tip of my thumb as I push in here. And the other issue is that there isn't enough space between the lock bar cutout and the frame itself, to where, because you have to put such bear down pressure on the lock bar, you end up pushing it up against the frame. See how it bends like that? And then it grinds up against the back of the frame, so it just doesn't feel great. There's a lot of work that could be done in terms of using a thinner frame and really tuning this to be an easier knife to use. So if you're the kind of person that wants to use like a knife to fidget with, and you're going to play with a knife at your desk, this isn't the one for you. It's really not. It's just, it's so stubborn, and it requires so much effort to open and close. It's just not my favorite in that sense. But the next thing to talk about is the clip. The clip is, not the best, not the worst. It does function pretty well. It's pretty strong tension-wise, and you will see here that it's more of a nub than a ramp. And what this means is that you might fight it a little bit with your pocket. For me, it was definitely 2 hands in, sometimes 2 hands out, kind of depended on the pants that I was wearing, but it's pretty stiff. I mean, it's in there. So if you need, the pocket clip that's really that makes you really assured and really confident, this is a good one. It's not going to go anywhere in your pocket, that's for darn sure. But if you're kind of an office worker and you like to kind of casually pull your knife in and out, this clip is a little bit strong. But I will say that the overall shape of the clip following the flow of the knife is something that I'm definitely a big fan of. And then another thing that I'm a fan of is the internal hardware. Internal hardware isn't any harder to do on a frame lock like this than it is to do external hardware. I really don't know why more makers don't take advantage of this. It's such a clean look. All you have to do is, you're drilling the same hole. All you have to do is put the screw in the other side, basically. So I don't know why more makers don't take advantage of that kind of design aesthetic, because I think it looks super good, and it just really gives the knife a clean look. I think a lot of knives, we have trouble with just so many screws in the knife, and that's not something that you have here, so I definitely appreciate that. Kind of continuing on the line of speaking about design, I do really like this sort of inlay that he's done here. You can see that it's depressed into the knife. It's not flush. And that's kind of a per knife by knife basis about whether or not I like that. I do like inlays that are flush, because it's always cool to run your finger across and kind of see how well the maker's done at making everything flush and stuff. But this particular knife, especially with the shaping that he's done for the inlay, lends itself very well to the inlay kind of actually being in, sort of set in to the knife. And then I think that, overall this little area here where he cuts around the screw and everything, I think it looks really good. And I think the fact that the inlay is actually relieved into the knife is a really nice touch here. Of course, he does other inlays. You can get this with Timascus or G10 or what have you. So that's super cool. And on this particular knife, I really like that the inlay is actually pressed into the knife. Now, the last thing to really talk about in terms of design is going to be the ergonomics. Now, this knife, I think the ergonomics might actually be the best part about the knife. However, there's kind of an unfortunate caveat to that, which is that it's only for a certain size of hand. So I am about a medium glove, and I have shorter, stubbier fingers. If you're a large glove, or bigger, this might just outright not be for you. This knife is 7.5 inches long, and that really shows because the ergonomics, you'll see here that the frame kind of sweeps up like this, and then you have the flipper tab sweeping in like this, which means you're really cradled by the grip area. Now, this is something that I do like about knives. I like kind of being cradled, but again, it does kind of eschew all of your potential buyers with bigger hands, because you're just not going to have a comfortable grip if your hands are really any much bigger than mine. However, if you are that kind of person, we can go ahead and show you that the index finger fits very well into this little area that's sort of accented by the flipper tab and is kind of cut out here for the index finger. And then these three fingers, they cradle very well around this curved area. And you can actually see here that the clip being set forward, and because the ergonomics are so good, the clip actually is inset kind of right here as opposed to right here. And I really like that. I think that that sort of fit gives you a lot more control over the knife, and I can definitely appreciate that. So it works very well for me. And then continuing with the ergonomics, you'll see here that the thumb rest area has nice jimping. It's smooth enough to feel comfortable to the touch, whether you touch the edges or the top, but it is kind of grippy enough that if you bear down on it, you're not going to slip too much. So I can appreciate that. And you can see here that the overall shape is kind of exact to the pad of my thumb, and that the jimping is all throughout that area, which gives me a lot of control. So in saber grip, this knife has a really, really good ergonomic feeling. And then if you switch over to pinch grip, you'll see that a lot of those features translate. So this little cutout here for your thumb really to be able to get to the lock bar, but for your index finger as well, that functions very well for your thumb to kind of sit in the pinch grip. So this middle finger here is kind of just hanging out back here. The thumb will pinch very well down into this inset, and then of course you can put your tip of your index finger anywhere you want really on this jimping, whatever's comfortable for the task at hand, and you'll be served by the jimping very well. We are looking at sort of a Warncliffe sheep's foot blade. You can correct me in the comments if you like. I'm not much of a blade guy. I actually don't even know the steel on this knife. I apologize. But it is finished with a beautiful hand rub satin finish. Kind of a definitely a horizontal look. I'll try to get some of these fingerprints off. So really clean look to that. And overall, again, with that pinch grip, this knife's going to be a really great slicer. So overall, it's pretty sweet there. So let's see. One last thing that I want to talk about in terms of the features are the gosh darn screws. Guys, I don't know what's up with this. I started out kind of defending the custom pivot thing and the custom screw thing, and by now I have to agree with Nick Shabazz. There's just no getting around that this is a bad thing. Now, I'm not 100% sure of this, but it's pretty clear to me that Clyde is machining these himself. If he's not, then he's having it done by a friend or something, I would assume. I don't think these are purchased. And I would assume, based on that previous assumption, that he's machining his own tool for the knife as well. Now, I don't have really a problem with doing custom pivots and stuff. One, if you want to do a custom pivot, just put a Torx in the center of it. We see that a lot. Where's my Larevo? This pivot is friggin' gorgeous. There's no arguing with that. You have a beautiful, I think it's Steve Kelly, is that his name? Something Kelly, does these pieces of hardware. So he's got this really cool looking pivot with Torx and then a pivot collar. Looks great. Totally useful, or usable. This knife, on the other hand, not so much. Now, if he was including a tool, I'd be a little less critical. So We Knives, for example, obviously includes the tool with all of their knives. It's not a great tool, and it doesn't function super well, so that's kind of still a bad thing, but they at least include it, right? They at least put forth the effort. So if this knife came with a tool that fit these screws, I wouldn't probably even really be complaining about it. I'd just tell you about the tool and move on. But the fact that it's not included and the fact that he's in South Africa really shuts me out from being able to buy from being able to buy the knife, because I can't maintain it. And quite frankly, aesthetics over the ability to maintain is a bad thing. So while I agree that these screws look absolutely gorgeous and super cool and they really help the knife in terms of aesthetics, include a tool, or they're bad. They're a negative thing. And that's about it. I'm going to move on from that. So the last thing that I want to say about kind of Clyde's knives in general is that African custom knives, I'm sure you guys are already familiar. I've worked with them plenty in the past. I do believe, and please don't quote me on this, but I'm 99% sure they did just score an exclusivity deal. I don't know if it's exclusivity or if they just are able to carry his knives now. I think it's an exclusivity deal on being the U.S. purveyor for his knives. So definitely look forward to that. Go check out their website. I'm sure they'll have some available. Maybe they'll be sold out by the time this video finally gets uploaded. But if you're looking for one of Clyde's knives, I think you're going to have to snag one either from ACK or directly from Clyde himself at a show or direct, via like a custom order. So that's really it, guys. I guess, if you're looking for something that's like a Sebenza, but a flipper, this is a sweet knife. It's really robust. It's got great ergonomics. It's going to work very well for you as an everyday carry. It'll take wear very well, and it's really going to work out for you. I really, really believe that. But if you're looking for the kind of knife that you can kind of fidget with at your desk, like a Thorburn or something, this one isn't it, guys. It's just got way too much stiffness to the overall design, the lock bar, the action, and everything like that. But thanks again to John for sending this knife along. If you guys want to see beautiful pictures of all of these knives, you can do so by following me on Instagram at tovarishworks. And of course, if you'd like to shoot me an email for any reason, you can do so by reaching me at tovarishworks@gmail.com. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.